Welcome back to another episode of the North Star Takes podcast. I'm Bailey Policki. He's Jacob Liberta. We're a Minnesota sports podcast, so if you're a Minnesota sports fan, please hit that subscribe button. And if you're a Vikings fan, give this video a like, as we are now in the meat of our GM and head coaching search. Interviewed a few candidates already for the GM, and it sounds like we've interviewed at least one person to be the head coach already of this team. And I guess just right off the bat, what struck you the most about this search? Any surprises for you so far? I know we're not really not too familiar with all the GM candidates, but what are your thoughts so far on the search for both GM and head coach?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. It's like there's not a whole lot of input into the GM search here. I think I don't have enough information about any of these candidates, nor do most people. But nothing's been too surprising there. The names they've interviewed and they've been thrown around on Twitter, I've seen. So that's about the extent of it. So nothing there is out of the ordinary. But considering the head coaching search, I think that's what's really taking me aback a little bit. Looking at the list, like the initial list that came out a few days ago, and I think it was 7 guys they identified, like 4 DCs and 3 OCs, I want to say. And the names collected on that list were not what I was expecting, because I was thinking of like the Bieniemys of the world or Leftwich or something like that. But instead, we're getting all these guys like Todd Bowles, Dan Quinn, even D'Amico Ryans now, guy who's never been head coach. And then we got even the DC for, I want to say it was
The Eagles, I think.
Yeah, the Eagles, because I think he used to coach the Vikings back in the day. I think, to my understanding, what I've heard. And then the 3 OCs obviously were Kellen Moore, Nathaniel Hackett, and who's the last one? I'm forgetting right now. Who was it?
There was a Rams offensive coordinator.
Oh, Kevin O'Connell.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. Yeah. So these weren't the names I was expecting, but interesting nonetheless, for better or worse, I guess. But I'd say they already completed the interview with Hackett because they had to, because of for purposes of being allowed to do that when the Packers on a bye week. So I've heard a lot of good things about him. I think his steam for me is really building lately. I'm not a huge fan of bringing in a Packers guy, but at the same time, if he's a great leader, a guy players are definitely going to respect and be able to take us to that next step, I guess. I don't really care where he's coming from. So that's intriguing. I think my expectations of Moore being great right now have gone down after that playoff game. That kind of soured me. I know it's just one game, but still, it's like those are the games you want to have. Like you absolutely have to have. So I think then that kind of lessens his value for me. And I'm still off on the DC thing, just because I want an offensive guy solely because I don't want a revolving door anymore at offensive coordinator, because the minute you get good, then they're gone and you have to start over again. Like how many offensive coordinators do we have with Zimmer? Like 7 and 8 years or something, whatever.
Yeah. I mean, granted, he fired a couple of them, but
that's true. Yeah, that was in Zimmer's control, and these are the guys he brought in specifically. But at the same time, it's still, if you're a good team and doing well, like, your guys are going to keep going like that. So I want to avoid that as much as possible, because I think offense can hold you over where defense I don't think quite can, unless you have a really dominant defense. So I think I just want an offensive guy, and I like giving looks to people like Hackett or Moore too, even though I kind of soured on him a little bit.
Yeah.
And I would like, and Kevin O'Connell, the McVay tree, that kind of intrigues me a little bit. I'm a big McVay guy, but I'd love to give Leftwich for sure an interview, because I think all the things I've heard, I know he's associated with Tom Brady, which is a blessing and a curse, but I think he's at least worth a look.
Absolutely. And to your point, I'm soured on Kellen Moore too. And it's not just one game. Really, Dallas didn't look good basically the whole second half of the season.
That's true.
They got off to that hot start. They even beat us with their backup quarterback. And basically since then, they just kind of slowly fell apart. They were the 3 seed, but it's like, I don't know. They were never that scary to me. So
I mean, what good teams did they beat though?
Yeah, that's a good point.
I can't think of any off the top of my head. They lost that Cardinals team down the stretch. That was the most prominent game I could think of. And then they got beat by that Niners team yesterday. And you think about the other, I think, top teams, they never played the Packers. They lost to the Bucs week 1. So I can't think of any signature wins that they had.
That is a good point. Yeah. And they play a horrible division every year. So that's kind of by default. And Kellen Moore, it might just be a couple years too early for me personally for him. Maybe he needs a little more seasoning. I think it's possible that Dallas fires Mike McCarthy after that gong show of a playoff game.
I could see it. I I don't think he'd get fired this year, but if Moore doesn't get hired this year by some team, I'd imagine he will. But maybe after that game yesterday, kind of some doubts creep into these GM's minds about these coaching vacancies that they have. But
Yep.
I think if he stays in Dallas one more year, I think McCarthy gets fired after next year, and then they make Moore the coach.
Yeah, and it's crazy to think about because you hear some of these things like the Texans, they're looking at a guy like D'Amico Ryans, or there's a linebacker coach from the Patriots. I'm struggling.
Oh, Gerard Mayo.
Gerard Mayo, yep, used to play for the Patriots.
Yep.
He's like a favorite to land a head coaching job. It's like there's some of these off the radar guys that are like talked about as, oh, this is a team's favorite guy so far. And granted, it's all rumors right now. Nothing's been finalized by any team. But it just kind of makes you wonder if some of these guys, like a Bieniemy once again, or a Leftwich, like maybe they don't end up, getting a job. And I'm wondering, you haven't seen anybody that's interviewed a Leftwich or a Bieniemy yet. And I'm wondering if that's simply because they don't want to interview until they're out of the playoffs.
Maybe.
Or maybe until, that Pro Bowl week comes around where they have that extra week built in there. I'm wondering if it's something along those lines because we're only a couple weeks away from, having the Super Bowl team set. So once it's down to those final two teams, assuming that either the Bucs or the Packers will come out of the NFC, I mean, that kind of leaves you your options right there because, we've already interviewed Hackett. So it's like if they like Hackett, he could be there or Leftwich could be there, and so, and I still don't think they're going to hire a head coach until they hire a GM. Like I'm guessing they're just doing their due diligence. A guy like Todd Bowles, I can't really take that interview seriously as him being a head coach because he's a 58-year-old defensive coordinator. That's literally, I think, the exact same age Mike Zimmer was when you hired him.
Yes, exactly. Because Zim, and that's the thing, I've heard comparisons to Bowles' kind of mentality to Zimmer's because I don't think he's quite as grouchy as Zim, but he's along those lines, really hard-nosed defensive guy that's really wants to play or not play it, go in the locker room with this angry attitude, I guess. I don't know what the words I'm looking for here is, but it's just too close to Zimmer that you don't really want to do that.
No, absolutely. And I'm kind of with you. I have reservations about this Nathaniel Hackett coming from the Packers, but if you can win over the respect of Aaron Rodgers, who's talked glowingly about him, basically a lot of those Packers veterans have, he's not we don't know much about the X's and O's because he doesn't call the plays, but at the same time, LaFleur's clearly a good offensive mind. Like that Packers offense has been very good. Obviously it helps to have an elite quarterback, but I don't know, man. Like I think there's something to be said of working with an elite quarterback, working with a good offense. That's why I'm really attracted with Byron Leftwich because you get a couple of years around Tom Brady. You have a few years under Bruce Arians, who's been one of the better offensive coaches of this generation. I think there's so much potential there. And then it's about, can you lead? And basically everything we've seen is Nathaniel Hackett's a good leader. Guys respect him. And I think Byron Leftwich kind of gives off that same vibe. Yeah. And what I will say about Bieniemy is I guess it's hard to know, but it kind of seems like he comes off as like an aggressive style coach. Like he'll get in players' faces. He'll be tough on them. And as good of an offensive mind as he could be, as good of a leader as he could be, I guess we really don't know. But I don't know if that kind of style would work with some of these current players the Vikings have,
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, you can go back as far as the AP days when Bieniemy was the running back coach here. Everybody, or I think it's known to some people at least that Bieniemy and AP certainly had their beefs sometimes because Bieniemy was a pretty hard-nosed dude, so he'd get on AP about things like his fumbling issues, and he didn't receive that well sometimes. And I don't know if that'd be too close to them too, but I would like to hire a guy like Bieniemy, or like I could beat the drum on this all day long that I want to hire an offensive mind just because I think with that too, they'd be more likely to bring in a new quarterback and want to groom their own guy, where I feel like a veteran defensive coach might be willing to ride it out with Kirk just because they know what they got and they want their offense to be something that they feel like they can really have an idea of what it's going to look like and not venture into the unknown of a rookie quarterback.
So here's what I kind of want to ask you about some of these coaching candidates too. There's this 49ers offensive coordinator, Mike McDaniels, super young, seems like a super bright guy. And then we got this offensive coordinator from the Rams. Like, what are your thoughts on guys like this who are basically just straight from a system? They're super young, unproven. It's kind of like a Kellen Moore, honestly. But these guys are kind of like names that no one had really talked about until the offseason got here. what are your thoughts on a guy like that Rams offensive coordinator we're interviewing? I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but
Yeah, Kevin O'Connell. Yeah,
O'Connell. Yep.
I think it's certainly worth talking to him. I feel like you get a vibe how much he really knows when you interviewed him. At least I would hope if you had the right
Yeah.
people doing the interview. And I think there's a good track record there, even though it's brief because McVay has only been a head coach for 5 years or something like that. I think this is his sixth season, maybe, whatever it's been. And I mean, he's had a few assistants already leave the staff and become head coaches, and I think it's had good results so far. Because I know LaFleur technically went to Tennessee first and then went to Green Bay, but obviously he's hit it big. And then you got Kyle Shanahan worked with McVay, and he has been tremendous in San Francisco. And then you got Zach Taylor out in Cincinnati. He's doing wonders with obviously Joe Burrow. You got to get the quarterback right, and sometimes you got to get the number one pick to do that. But still, I mean, he's making it work in year 3 now. The Bengals look great. I personally think they're going to the AFC Championship game. I don't think they're going to get past Buffalo or Kansas City though, but I think they can beat that Tennessee team. Just off the record.
I think they can too.
And I just love what's going on there with their offense. I think it's only getting better every year too.
Mm-hmm.
And then thinking about Brandon Staley, even who was this guy? Back in 2009, he was a defensive assistant at St. Thomas, just in the Twin Cities here. And now all of a sudden here we are. His evolution has been crazy. Go look it up. I mean, this guy quickly progressed through the ranks, and he was on McVay's staff and the number one defense in the league last year. And he got a head coaching job. It's who is this guy? I've never heard of him. And all of a sudden, I mean, obviously they missed the playoffs, and he certainly had his criticisms about going forward on fourth quite a bit. But I thought the Chargers had a pretty solid season with him at the helm for the first year of his coaching tenure. So,
yeah, he's kind of a prime example of why I'm not completely out on hiring a defensive coordinator, because if you can hire a leader like a Brian Flores, maybe this D'Amico Ryans as a true leader, then it's different, then you have a true head coach like a Mike Tomlin who just no BS. True. I'm going to coach all sides of the ball. I'm going to have my fingerprints on everything. But that, Zimmer never had that. He was just strictly, I just want to coach defense. And that's not going to work obviously nowadays. But at the same time, like you said, if you just keep rolling through offensive coordinator after offensive coordinator because your offense is good and teams want to hire your guy, then you're just going to keep running into the same issue. So whether you hire a Leftwich and he calls plays, or you hire a Nathaniel Hackett and he installs the system, but he has someone else call plays, I think it's completely different. So rather than hiring a defensive guy. So I think you can do it a couple different ways, but I just think you need that offensive system in place. And maybe a defensive guy can come in and, underneath an offensive coordinator, he can establish a system. And then maybe if the offensive coordinator moves on, I don't know. It's very complicated, but I think it's possible either way for it to work. I just think the odds are a lot higher that your offense stays successful year after year if you keep an offensive guy at the head coaching position.
Totally agree. And another drawback I have to hiring a defensive coach, like you said, if he's a good leader, he's a good leader, and that'd be great to bring in here. But at the same time, how often do you really strike gold there and bring in a guy like Mike Tomlin? How often do those come around? I don't know.
Yeah.
How good do you feel about these guys? It's kind of hard, obviously, to envision a guy turning into Mike Tomlin. That's a Hall of Fame coach. But exactly. I think it's certainly worth a shot if you really believe in a guy. So it's why I'm not paid to make all these huge decisions, because I can make or break a franchise pretty easily. So that's not my call, but I can certainly throw my 2 cents in on it. But really, I'm just done with the revolving door on offense, though. I can really hammer that home all day long.
Speaking of making decisions, do you trust the Wilfs to make the right decision with GM and then therefore with the head coach?
I think I do. I feel like they haven't done me wrong to this point in my fandom, because I think they played it right how they've done things, at least this offseason specifically, and letting go of both Rick and Zim to just have a nice clean cut removal of them, just because then you want to have a reset, because this team, they recognize that the team has the roster talent there, and that they can really elevate our play. It's more than just a mediocre 500 football team. Yeah. So I think they knew how to make that choice, and it's just they got pretty smart football people in there in the front office, I think, too, such as guys like Rob Brzezinski who've been there forever. Yep. So I'm good for now. I don't think it's time to panic, but obviously if we make some really sketchy GM or head coaching hire, then obviously I'm gonna I'm going to start to lose trust pretty quickly.
Yeah, I'm with you. Until they prove me wrong, I guess. I'm gonna trust them. I feel like they've established enough relationships. They have enough people in their existing front office that can point them in the right direction. Where I don't know. I trust them on this GM search because it seems like they're interviewing a wide array of candidates that all,
Sure.
honestly, to me, seem intriguing just based on their backgrounds of whether it's analytics or just being younger in general or just the path they've taken to get where they're at. I think there's a lot of intriguing candidates there. And so I think that as long as you have an open-minded GM that's willing to embrace analytics, embrace the offensive side of the ball, obviously the Vikings have had a pretty decent scouting department, and I don't think that's really going anywhere unless the new GM just decides to bring in their own scouting department. But I don't think you typically see that too often. So I trust him with the GM. It's more so just the head coach. Like, are you going to have a situation like with Brad Childress where someone kind of, paints you into a corner and you can't get out of it, and they're like, you either offer me this job now or I'm walking, and you don't want that happening either. So you want to be able to stand your ground and be able to make the correct decision. But I honestly think if they're willing to wait this thing out, they could really get a guy like Leftwich or Bieniemy, just because I think we still have the best job on the market, even with the Raiders job potentially being open now. I think there's like 8 or 9 head coach openings now in the NFL, which is just ridiculous. But
yeah, it's amazing. It kind of blows my mind how much it's really trickled into that direction, though, because usually it's all happens very quickly, whether that be in the middle of the season or the day after. But we've had 3 coach firings that have been after that Black Monday, so that kind of surprised me.
Same. It's like teams haven't quite made up their minds, and like the Raiders fired Mike Mayock after their playoff game, which, granted, all the things that have happened over the last year with the Raiders, it kind of makes sense. But if they end up not keeping that interim coach, who I think did a really good job, and I think that's going to be the 9th opening, and there's talk that maybe Jim Harbaugh would want to go to the Raiders, and which, I mean, they can have him because, I'm kind of past that point too. I think there's plenty of other candidates out there that we could have that would be just as good. So it's weird, man. It's crazy to me how like it seems like every year almost a third of the NFL is constantly changing head coaches.
Dude, I know, right? It's just a revolving door. It's a results-driven business. If you don't win, you're going to be fired, and it's going to happen quicker and quicker these days, it feels like. So I respect it. I don't think there's anything personal here. It's just nature of the business. You make more money when your team wins, and it's obviously more fun when your team wins. So I think this is fine the way it is. I think this is how it should be, and I'm glad that we're on that train this year towards wanting to be more than just this borderline playoff team.
Real quickly before we wrap up here, are you disappointed that Lane Kiffin has not had any more steam here?
A little bit for personal reasons, I guess. Yes, I think I'm a little sad to see that didn't pick up any more steam, like you said. But at the same time, there's plenty of guys out there, so it's not the end of the world. But I think Lane would have been a lot of fun. But that's all right.
Here's what I will say. I think this search is far from over. I think a GM gets hired within the next week and a half, which isn't really sticking my neck out too far. But then from there, you have another week or so till we're past those championship games and the conferences. And then with only 2 teams left, you kind of have your choices sitting right there in front of you. So I'm guessing within the next 2 weeks, probably, we'll have a GM and a head coach.
That sounds right. I think the NFC Championship game is going to be in 2 weeks. Or I shouldn't just say the NFC Championship game. I'm just thinking of guys like Hackett and Leftwich and whatnot. But more than just that, yeah, you should.
Could be Bieniemy and Dable too, or not Dable. Well, they play each other this upcoming weekend, but
yeah. But I get what you mean. Yeah, there's some coaches you could have to wait on until the Super Bowl, but a lot of them should be weeded out in 2 weeks from now. So, like you said, if you like your guy and his team's eliminated, then I could very well see us having a head coach 2 weeks from now.
Absolutely. So that'll be fun to keep an eye on. And once they finally hire this coach, then we can talk about what the heck to do with this roster, because there's definitely some roster changes that need to be made as well.
A lot of work to be done.
Absolutely. But until next time, that's going to do it for this edition of the North Star Takes podcast. Like I said earlier, if you're a Minnesota sports fan, please hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Give us a follow on both Twitter and Instagram, and leave your comments below who you're liking right now as a head coach candidate. Maybe if you have a favorite GM candidate, drop their name below as well. And just give us your thoughts on the remaining teams in the playoffs, and if you'd like us to snag one of those coaches the second they're eliminated. So make sure to leave those comments below, and thanks for watching.